TV3. Big thank you to Sandra and our studio guest for talking about lone culture here in Ghana. But now it's time for our health segment, which is brought to you by Lipton Tea, inspiration flowing from nature. Now, if you're watching that short video there, then you must know that we're actually talking about asthma this morning. And to help me talk about asthma this morning, we have a regular guest on our panel, Dr. Bote, who's from Ridge Hospital. Dr. Bote, good morning.
Good morning, Benny.
How are you?
I'm good.
Good. How's your weekend?
It was good.
Yeah, good. We'll leave it at that. Anyway, let's talk about asthma. Like we saw from the short video that was playing, it seems to be something that affects our respiratory function, something that stops us from breathing normally. Explain a little bit what asthma is.
Yeah, asthma is actually a respiratory problem. And it's actually a chronic disorder of the respiratory tree, whereby there's obstruction to flow of air in and out of your lungs. And it's not everybody who gets asthma. Some people have the predisposition to it, and then there are other risk factors that would make somebody more susceptible to getting an asthmatic attack. And for those who have these attacks, they know what triggers the asthma. Some may not know, but usually you know what it is. And one of the things to do is to try and avoid that allergen. What happens is that for most people, it starts from childhood. Some people start with what we call the adult onset asthma. It is sort of an immune reaction. Your immune system tries to react to, in quotes, a foreign substance that the person's body detects as injurious to the body. So things like pollen, things like dust, things like some people is aerosols or perfumes,
sprays,
sprays, things like
perfume,
feathers, things like furs of animals, etc. Somebody may be growing up and his system gets exposed to these substances. The person inhales it for the first time. The first time he may not have any reaction, but then because the person has that, probably the genetic predisposition to asthma, maybe there's a family history or there's a history of atopy. There's a family history of allergies, allergic dermatitis, allergic rhinitis, hay fevers, etc. The person's body sees this pollen or this dust that has entered into the respiratory system as a foreign object or injurious to the body. So sort of the body begins to mount up an immune reaction, so that next time when this foreign body, so-called foreign body, comes in, we're going to fight it because we think it's injurious to this body. So the next time that the person gets exposed to the dust, perfume, whatever it is, it gets into the respiratory tract, and then the body begins to, let's go and attack this foreign body. So the respiratory tree begins to what? Unleash inflammation onto that object, onto that foreign body. And the way it unleashes is by the muscles and the cartilages and the cells inside there becoming inflammatory and producing a lot of mucus.
So that's when the chest tightens and
so
the wheezing begins.
Yes, so a lot of mucus is produced in a way to go and phagocytose. So phagocytose, like you are going like amoeba, I'm going to grab the thing, produce this, go and grab it and get it out of the system. So it's a body trying to react or fight for itself. But unfortunately, because of that reaction, there's constriction of the muscles in the airway. They get constricted, tightens the airway, and there's very little space for air to pass. So that now air would have to force its way out through a very narrow space, and that is what leads to the whistling sound, what we call wheezing. It leads to difficulty in breathing, and you might want to cough to force air out. So tightness in the chest. So these are the prelims to the pathophysiology of asthma.
Okay, now I've met people with asthma throughout my life, and it does seem to range. I mean, some people have very mild asthma, which you can hear a little bit of wheezing, and then you have the full-blown extreme where if they have a cough, a small cough or a cold, it turns into an asthma attack, and they end up having to be on air supply. So I mean, with all of this, there being such mild and there being such severe cases, is there a chance that asthma could be contagious at all?
I cannot get asthma from you. It's not transmitted from person to person directly by contact. But there is the genetic aspect of it and there's the environmental aspect of it. So it's actually a combination of genetic and environmental factors.
Okay.
If there's mother, father, they have allergies, they have asthma in the family, its chances are that the kids that are born may also pick it up.
Right.
But there are some people too, they may not have these allergies. Yes, yesterday I had a kid and she was having asthma. And I asked the parents, is there any history of that? He said, no, there's nothing like that in the family.
Right.
I went to the family, there was nothing like that. But then she was having the wheezing sound. But I still had to treat her for asthma anyway, and she was fine. Now, so we're saying that for me and you, Benny, sitting here, I mean, if you have asthma and I get close to you, I will not get asthma.
Okay.
It must be a certain genetic predisposition, as in something in the family or that kind of thing. And then the environmental factors, as in where we are, soot all over the place, cars, exhaust fumes all over, dust all over the place, can make somebody react to such substances. I remember, I don't have any allergies as far as I'm concerned, but until one day I use perfumes. I'm okay with perfumes, but there was one particular perfume that I just one day used, and I just started sneezing. I sneezed and I coughed till I thought I was going to die. I was then in medical school. So ever since then, I've never touched that particular perfume again.
Okay. Now, speaking about coughing and wheezing, I mean, does that necessarily mean that you have asthma? I mean, the fact that you cough a lot and you do wheeze, could that be onset of asthma, or is it an indication that you have asthma?
Coughing is a symptom of a respiratory problem. It could be a symptom of just an upper respiratory problem. It could also be a symptom of a lower respiratory problem. I mean, they can even have TB and be coughing, chronic cough for several months. So cough alone is not the gold standard for saying that because you're coughing you have asthma. Okay. But the characteristic thing is about the wheezing, the tightness in the chest, where the person would have to be giving the bronchodilators to dilate the airways before they can breathe well.
So bronchodilators.
Yes, as I was saying, the trachea, the windpipe. Let me bring it down. The windpipe would divide into we call it the trachea, the bronchus, and then the bronchioles. All these things are there. Now they are held by cartilages and then muscles in between. So the whole respiratory system has muscles.
Right.
Now, in the attack, during the asthma attack, be it the person inhaling cold air or be it the person having been exposed to an allergen, what happens is that the muscles tighten up.
Right.
So they constrict. So we call it bronchoconstriction. That the muscles in the bronchus are constricted.
Right.
So one way of dealing with it is to dilate them. So give you something to inhale as a bronchodilator to dilate the bronchial ceiling so that air can pass and air can enter and air can come out. So that's about the bronchodilators. So classically, it is got more to do with the person coming and has difficulty in breathing, and sometimes so severe that if you ask the person question, they cannot even complete one whole sentence. It starts talking and within one breath, he cannot complain. He has to take another breath again before he can complete a whole sentence. So these are some of the characteristics, not just coughing, but there's wheezing, there's difficulty in a chest tightness, and sometimes difficulty in even completing a statement in one breath.
Okay. Now let's talk about treatment for asthma. Typically, there are inhalers, there are the face mask, with the respiratory stuff. But typically, most of them seem to be steroid based. Now, since they are steroid based and steroids do have some addictive properties, are asthma medications, do they have a level of addictiveness to them?
Well,
or can they be addictive?
Usually the steroids you use, I haven't had any situation where somebody is getting addicted to it.
Okay.
But in terms of the treatment of asthma, when people have the acute attacks, maybe from the house to the hospital, most of them have their what commonly called the Ventolin inhalers. It's actually salbutamol. It's salbutamol. It's a short-acting substance. So you keep pumping it into your respiratory system, and it's the initial way of trying to dilate the bronchus or the bronchioles so that you get to the hospital, and then full treatment is started. Now, when you get to the hospital, usually they will give you something to breathe if it's an acute attack. So we call it nebulization. So the same salbutamol that you probably were pumping is now put in the form of aerosols, like it's nebules. So to get together with normal saline, and then it just flows through a machine, and then you breathe in. So it's like it has a direct impact on the site.
Right.
So it's not like it's going through your blood or going through your muscle or going through your mouth before it goes through digestion. It's direct contact with the site of action.
Yeah.
So it helps open the airways a bit. And then we also give the steroids. The steroids might be the intravenous one. The steroids are actually anti-inflammatory.
Okay.
So the inflammation, I say basically it's a chronic inflammatory disease of the airway.
Yeah.
So the steroids will then reduce the inflammatory process that is going on, so that all the fluids or the mucus that are congested in the lungs begin to go down. And then also maybe when you go home, they put you on some steroids to go home with, so that you keep the inflammation down. Yes, steroids have side effects. I mean, the more you use them, I mean, once they are fighting against your inflammation, then chronic use of it means that your immune reactions, your body has an immune system. The more you use steroids, you sort of suppress your immune system as well. So they are immunosuppressant as well.
Okay.
Again, if you're going to use steroids for a long time, you're going to sometimes affect your bone growth, etc., the bone strength. So it's not something that we recommend that chronically you use them. So you use them when you have the acute attack, and then maybe a couple of days after that, you go back onto your long-acting ones that it's in the market, budesonide, the salmeterol, and the clometazones, and all that. Okay. So that if for them, they have to probably every day they pump for one before they go out, so that it prevents attacks from coming on. But when you have an attack, there's always the pump, emergency one that you keep using until you get to the hospital. Okay.
Now, how can we, because you said previously that some asthma attacks are brought on by maybe allergies. So how can we identify our allergies to prevent asthma attacks? Because we were talking before, I have hay fever. It doesn't come out in Ghana. It only happens when I go back to the UK or I'm in other countries. But it has similar symptoms. I mean, my breathing becomes difficult. However, there's a lot more itching of the eyes and runny nose. But I mean, I've realized that I have that allergy now. So when I get to certain places like the UK, I start taking my allergy pills and all the rest of it. Antihistamines, exactly. So how can we identify what our allergies are in order to be able to?
Yeah, that's why I gave you an example that I had an experience, and ever since I've noted that.
Right
now, we had a very pitiful situation where a woman virtually sleeps in the emergency room all the time because her allergy was to perfume. So she comes into the emergency room, she gets nebulized, she's fine for some time. She walks out, gets to the main gate of Kolebu, and then somebody passes by her with some strong perfume, and she comes back in with breathlessness. So that is, hers is with perfume. Someone's own is with dust. So if yours is with dust, you get to know that I got up in the morning, I was sweeping, and then all of a sudden my breathing changed. So next time, either you cover your nostrils with something when you are breathing, or you just avoid when you are sweeping, or you just totally avoid the allergen. The main thing is about the avoidance of what you have noted to be the cause.
Right.
Somebody it may be a food allergy, may go eat shrimps. It's not good for the person. Eggs, milk. Somebody else may be fine with it. Somebody's own will be exercise. I mean, exercise-induced asthma.
Yes.
They asthmatic, and you cannot take certain levels of exercise because now when I'm doing my normal breathing, I take in air, and then the respiratory tract warms the air as it goes down. But when you're exercising, it's like you're not taking air faster.
Right.
So you're taking more cold air, and cold air will constrict muscles.
Okay.
So
that's what brings on the onset of the attack.
Start constricting muscles, and then you realize that you get into attack. People who are asthmatic and they smoke as well are likely to have more frequent attacks of asthma. So there are a whole range of things that you would get to know that this is not good for me, this is what triggers my asthma, and therefore you look out for it.
When it comes to medication, one more time, knowing that it is somewhat steroid based, what's the advice that you give to pregnant women? Because obviously it would have some effect on the pregnancy, wouldn't it?
Yeah. It's known that when just this morning I had to handle a pregnant woman who was seen yesterday at 11 a.m. with asthmatic attack.
Oh, okay.
And she was nebulized. She was giving the necessary medications and came back this dawn again with
another
asthmatic attack. Now, when you are pregnant, chances are that you are likely to get some things more frequently than others. So if you have the predisposition already, it's for you again to guard against the allergens that trigger your asthma.
But you have to be doubly as...
You have to double. You have to be very, very careful not to get close to these things that trigger asthma. Because again, in pregnancy, you realize that you cannot be giving all the medication that a normal, a non-pregnant person is going to be given, because we are always considering that you are 2 in 1 now.
That's right.
There's babies that if you're going to be giving you steroids all the time, it's going to affect the baby as well.
Okay, so we make sure that... So they have to be extra careful to avoid those allergens that could be causing those things. Okay. Now, we talked about exercise-induced asthma. How do we determine how much exercise before we realize? Because some people would be different, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Some people could run a mile and be okay. Other people might run for the nearest trotro and come out with an attack. So it's a case of identifying our individual.
Exactly, and so you would know your level of tolerance when it comes to how much you can take. And these things, a doctor cannot tell you directly, but it's by experience. You know what level of exercise you can take that does not trigger your asthma attack, and you know what level that when you go beyond, it also triggers it up. So it's not by intuition, but it's by experience. So those who have this asthma, they usually know what it is that triggers. Sepsis are sometimes knowing or unknowingly they still
do it and push themselves.
But again, it doesn't also mean that because asthma has, some people have exercise-induced asthma, it means that our kids who are children cannot, who are asthmatic, that they cannot go out and play football, or they cannot let the children play. When the problems come, we solve them. But then as they go through that, they also learn that this is what I...
Since you've already answered my first question, we're going to play a little game here. True or false?
A little game.
I went on the internet, I found some myths about asthma, so you can answer true or false, and hopefully we can dispel some of these myths that are out there.
That reminds me of medical school.
The first one you've already answered. Children with asthma cannot play sports or games.
False.
False, okay, because they can, you just need to find out what their levels are. Okay. Alternative medicines work as well as prescribed medication.
False.
False. Why?
Well, because I haven't
you don't know about alternative
medicine.
Okay. Here's the next one. Asthma can improve by moving from city centers to countryside.
Yeah, that's true. The reason being that we're talking of the triggers. The triggers include dust, smoke, pollen, etc.
Emissions,
emissions. So the city centers are so choked with exhaust fumes that somebody can, even walking by the roadside and fumes are all over the place, can trigger the asthma. You're sitting in a trotro or the bus that is smoking from the behind, the whole car gets engorged in smoke, and it can trigger the asthma. But if you go to even just move. I remember I went to Danfa some years ago, back in May. We went to Danfa to stay there for 1 week doing community health. I didn't want to come back to Accra. Because the air was just so nice. I mean, you wake up and everything is green around you. I'm like, what? Yeah. What is it that we are breathing in Accra? I mean, it's
Let's
dangerous.
not use the word. We can't use it on television. Okay, here's another one. We talked about smoke. Smoking doesn't affect asthma.
False.
Okay, it does affect asthma.
It does.
Severely.
Severely.
All right. When you have asthma, you're not allowed to have pets. False. There are some pets that you can have.
You can have, but you need to be careful.
You need to be careful. And I know that now, actually, there are certain breeds of dogs and cats that are hypoallergenic. Is that right?
Yeah.
Hypoallergenic. Yeah. Okay. See, I'm doing well. Okay. True or false? If you have asthma, you need to avoid wheat and milk.
If it's a trigger, if you notice it to be a trigger, just avoid it.
Okay, so it's a case
because wheat and milk. Not every asthmatic person will react to wheat and milk unless, of course, they have that particular food allergy as well.
Okay, so you need to be careful and just make sure that you don't have that allergy. Okay, asthma is a psychological disease.
It's not psychological; it's real.
No, I think what they're talking about is, I mean, it's brought on by certain status of your mood.
All right. Okay. So,
for instance, if you're angry, if you're stressed,
that we're talking of excess of emotions.
Uh-huh.
Laughter, extreme laughter can, for
bring
somebody, can bring on the asthma attack. Extreme crying. I mean, bad news, they cry. And then, it can bring the attack. So we have a lot of extreme emotion, extreme excitement, extreme sadness. All this can trigger. And then again, there are some people who come to hospital and we call it hysteria. They are not asthmatic, but they come. I can't breathe. I can't breathe.
Like hyperventilating?
Yeah. So, hyperventilating. Yeah. I can't breathe. But the point is that if you're asthmatic, you can't even be saying, I can't breathe. Right. It's impossible.
So it's more of an anxiety attack.
An anxiety, so something called anxiety neurosis. And let me say this, that not everybody who comes to the hospital with wheezing, sort of like difficulty in breathing and wheezing, may be having asthma. There is, what we are dealing with today is actually what we call bronchial asthma. Okay, there is the other type for people who are hypertensive, have cardiac disease, heart disease, that we call cardiac asthma. Right. That is more like a heart failure condition, congestive heart failure. In which case, it's not about air, but usually the lungs are filled with fluid. Because the left ventricle is failing. So there's fluid sitting in the lungs, so that the spaces that air is supposed to sit. Technically, I'm just trying to bring it down. The place that air is supposed to sit, fluid is sitting there instead. So for those kind of people, we don't treat them with normal treatment for asthma. We're actually trying to get put them on this, high levels of diuretics to make them to get rid of the water out of them, the fluid out of them, and within time they pick up. So that one is for the doctor to really examine the patient and know. I mean, that there's an elderly man or a young person has high blood pressure and all that, and probably having left ventricular or acute left ventricular failure. So that is cardiac asthma, and then we also have the bronchial asthma.
That's what we're talking about. All right, quickly, Dr. Bokte, just before we do wrap up, what's the advice that you give to anybody who actually has asthma? I mean, just quick basic advice that they can deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, just understand the physiology of asthma, and once you understand it, have your emergency salbutamol or Ventolin inhaler with you. If you have an attack, just start using it and just get ready to be getting to the hospital. Right. And also sometimes come to terms with the fact that I have asthma. A lot of people are still in the state of denial.
Let people around you know as well, just in case you do have an attack, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So you start heading to the hospital so that we can take care of you. And again, if you know the things that trigger your asthma, cold weather triggers your asthma, you don't put on your air condition all the time, because these are the things that cause your bronchi or the muscles in your bronchioles to constrict, and then it can trigger the asthma. So you know yourself very well, or you know yourself and know your asthma, and then you can be able to forestall the onset of such attacks.
All right. Dr. Bote, thank you once again for coming in and helping us out with our medical issues. Our health segment has been brought to you by Lipton Tea, inspiration flowing from nature. And if you do suffer from asthma, please take care of yourself and note the things that trigger your attacks. We'll be back in just a few moments with lots more here on a new day. Don't miss out.